Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who kept us going for over 350 episodes, crawling to 400, actually.
Very near 400. Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Michael Dude. Thank you, Michael.
Hey,
Michael's also a filmmaker and is working on some cool projects. I'm not gonna drop him. I don't know how secret, but he let me review a few things. So you should pay attention to Michael on Twitter. I think his Twitter handle is also Michael Dude, but he does a lot of like FGC filmmaking stuff.
I was going to say he's a long time.
He's been. I think he's been listening to the podcast since the beginning.
Yeah.
But also we have a sponsor to thank. Of course, we're talking about Manscaped. There's a name right there, and this is their newest product and my newest favorite by them. It's the Beard Hedger Pro, and I've got a couple of favorite things about them. One being how easy it is to clean because you can just remove the guide, but two, the guide is easily adjustable with this little dial back here,
which I think the crowning jewel of the whole thing, because I've used many other beard trimmers and none of them have that nice dial thing.
The dial thing is sick because it also goes by 0.5 millimeters, which like most others will go entire jumps, so it's hard to get like a
2
fade.
millimeters or whatever, 3 to 5.7 or whatever.
And those are fine for like general, you want to keep your beard short like I have it right now, but this lets you fade into like your sideburns or get like your clean. You want to have that Kratos beard where it just gets sharp and stuff. This will do it. And speaking of sharp, the blades are sharp, so I would use the guide. I'm not an expert on that, but I haven't had the balls to do it without the guide. I would use the guide. The other thing about it is it's got a 60-minute battery and it is water resistant. So while I'm not sure I would use it in the shower directly under the water, apparently that is the thing.
Yeah, because like both the lawnmower and that by Manscaped, both are waterproof. They say you can use it in the shower. And I'm like, I don't know why. I mean, who knows? I can't imagine why, but it's cool that it does it, right? Like options are good.
Yeah, no, I love, well, the lawnmower, I get why you'd use that in the shower. You just, get it going real fast.
I get why you'd use it in the shower, but not during a shower.
Yeah, right. Not under the water.
Not as like your little water icicles are forming off your ball hair,
But supposedly you can do it. You get after it if that's what you want to do. But if you want to check out the lawnmower or the Beard Hedger Pro or any of their products like the Boxers 2.0, which we also love, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you. So there was a couple of surprises last night, which caused us to hold off on recording just by a few hours. Well, last night they dumped on you that there's Xenoblade DLC coming.
Well, like we knew it was coming. Here's the funny thing, is that they announced it last time I was out. Same place.
Yeah, sometimes this always happens to you.
Always happens to me. They announced the direct when I was out. Then and doing similar theme park stuff. They announced it back more than a year ago that for the announcement. And then they announced the DLC. They announced they teased the DLC back in February when I was out, and then last night I'm out, and they do the trailer. And then here's the weird thing: it's almost a shadow drop because it's out in a week.
Yeah, no, they've been sort of amazing about shadow drops. Just everyone's been kind of amazing about I think that's going to be the trend. I think that's going to be the new,
it's dangerous, but okay, let's see where it goes, I guess.
You know what? If the game is popular enough, but also not Xenoblade, not to talk shit about it, isn't necessarily like a flagship game.
It's not.
Right.
I mean,
so it's popular enough. It has its diehard fans that they know it's going to sell, but also it's not flagship enough that they need to devote and build hype, and kind of like they can design an entire, quarter around it.
You're right, and maybe this is good for it. Maybe it would have even. I don't think it would have been better to do a full shadow drop. I mean, I think we wanted that trailer anyways.
No. Hi-Fi
but-
Rush, it works great for a full shadow drop, and there's a couple games in the indie world thing. I think
Yeah, there was a couple that shadow dropped, and I was like, actually, oh, really? Interesting.
Right. I think a shadow drop raises hype in the moment. If your game isn't something people are necessarily going to look forward to off the bat, you can make it like a sudden like pique your interest to grab it just by nature of like.
It's funny because it's like the well, God, I'm so old. This is like the Kmart Blue Light special.
Yes.
Of gaming, where it's just kind of like you weren't there for this, you weren't thinking about it, but now that it's on sale and it's in front of you, you're like, oh, maybe I'll pick it up.
Right.
It's done wonders for Metroid Prime. Like that was a remaster, so it's like, but like it might have easily sold more than the original game ever did.
Well, I'm sort of shocked that they did it for Metroid, just because Metroid's iconic, but it's never been like a big seller. Yeah, it's never. I mean, it's. I don't think I've ever seen a line for a Metroid game at a game store.
I think,
but it is beloved.
I think Dread was the best-selling game, the most recent one, and it like plateaued at like 3 million. Like Metroid had like never gotten to 3 million. I mean, Xenoblade's never gotten to 3 million. They've all like eked over 2, but they've never gotten to like 3 million sales. And then the Prime remaster might have done it.
Wow.
It's just, well, I mean, there's at some point, I mean, we've talked about it before, but there's a massive difference between where gaming is now and where gaming was for the first half of video games life. The total user base was extremely small in comparison to today. Because right now you're talking about an industry that has, I would say, give or take, 300 million, estimation. Like, there's about 300 million people who buy video games. We either one a year or multiple games a year, but like generally a person who is interested in purchasing video games or will even possibly purchase, you're looking at about 300 million people. And before that was probably 50 million or less.
I like to put it like even 15 years ago, and 15 years ago isn't even that long ago. That's what, 2008?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, gaming was growing. It was in its big growth phase in that.
But like, you weren't going to just randomly run into like, you wouldn't necessarily just be in a college class and the topic of conversation is whatever game came out.
Yeah.
Right. The same way comic books wasn't that way in 2008. In 2008 is when like Iron Man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Today, most everybody generally, like anybody you run into, is going to know something about comic books and probably a little something about games.
Yeah. And to put this in perspective, PS2 is the best-selling system of all time. Majority of it because, one, none of them lasted long.
Yeah, they all broke.
Everyone had to replace one at some point. And B, everyone used it mostly as a DVD player. And the reason I say this is because like the best-selling PS2 game of all time is one of the GTAs. It's like 18 million.
Not GTA 3.
I think it's San Andreas maybe, or Vice City.
Well, San Andreas
it's one of the GTAs, right? I don't know which one, but they're all up there, like in the top. Like the best-selling PS2 game of all time is like 18 million, right? Just think that number. The best-selling Switch game, and Switch is not even done, is Mario Kart Deluxe, and it's over 50 million. Like, to put that in perspective, on a single console, 50 million Mario Kart 8 Deluxes have been sold. That's well more than double the highest selling PS2 game. GTA 5 has sold like 170 million copies.
Wow.
Like to put that in perspective, like, the highest selling GTA game from the PS2 era sold like 18 million copies. You could probably give or take like, another 6 if you count the Xbox, right?
Wow.
6 or 10 maybe. And then, okay, and what does GTA 5 sold? Like over 150 million.
Insane. Granted, today's episode, we're talking mostly about like what the world looks like for indies right now.
Yeah, and indies kind of benefited from this. Hell, indies, you could even argue, sort of grew because of this explosion that indies now had a place to grow to that. Just they had consumers to sell to.
It's the content revolution. Is what I think. It's your Game Passes, your Netflix even. Netflix is getting into gaming now. Where
Yeah,
it's
they
like,
were in indie world too, which makes me a little like, what? No,
yeah, you give a little
how,
side.
how are you indie if Netflix is publishing? Whatever. Okay.
Well, but so you're gonna have such a need for games, just any kind of content,
Mm-hmm.
that it's gonna open the door, especially for what I think is gonna be the 3 to 5 hour mark of a game, like a 3 hour to 5 hour game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I not to pick on any one particular game, but like my time at Sandrock or Minico's Night Market, which were like the first two shown in the indie
Yeah.
world, um, they're both like a different take on what I would call the Harvest Moon,
Harvest Moon, Animal Crossing.
right? That sort of thing. Whereas like my time at Sandrock definitely goes after that. Post-apocalyptic also has combat, but is mostly Harvest Moon.
Yeah.
You know, it's Fallout 4, but maybe done more interesting.
I was a little bit worried at the beginning because it was like, I'm like, okay, the first two games I'm seeing like literal like the crop, the farm, the square crops.
Right.
I'm like,
well, then they had
it's
the
like,
Overcooked ripoff
I mean,
too.
yeah, and then a straight Overcooked ripoff. Like,
Plated.
I guess you could call it more of an expansion to Overcooked, really. But yeah, I was like sitting there. I'm like, okay, do you remember like last fall, people were kind of complaining how like the main Nintendo Direct was full of Harvest Moon games, like from Square and from other people. I'm like, how many
Yeah.
fucking like Harvest Moon games are we gonna get? Like, Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley are great games that
They
I
are.
don't play, but I would very much warn against people trying to indie people going like, I want to do Animal Crossing, but with my art style. And I'm like, like, I think you're running into the problem that on a much smaller scale that BRs have run into, where it's like people are invested in the particular like BRs they've already invested in. It is not easy, nor is it probably a good idea to try to take on. I'm going to take on Fortnite now. It's going to be Fortnite, but it's going to be like even more anime or whatever. Like, actually, it's funny because I'm sit there and say like, well, what if you did a different art style Fortnite? I'm like, Fortnite has every art style in it. It
Right,
has like
every
straight up
episode.
like anime characters that are cel shaded. It has like straight up real life people like LeBron James and whatever. So it's like,
I do think that BR is actually one of the places that an indie developer can compete, only because of the Unreal editor that came out recently.
that's kind of like but then you're playing within Epic's ecosystem, but maybe that's fine.
But that's the win, is if you can find a way to stand out within Epic Games ecosystem, you have the tools provided to you by Epic Games. Epic Games gives you a sense of legitimacy, that you might not have just like if you came out of nowhere as like a modded game. Granted, I know two of the biggest BRs ever were basically just mods of like Arma 3, but there is a sense of legitimacy from using Unreal, and you can like put out one map where you can put all your time into one thing, maybe make a little bit of money,
Yeah.
but more importantly, show skills. And you don't have to say like, oh, this is a mod. No, I built it with Unreal Editor out the gate. This is what I can do. So
it's
it's
not so much a mod anymore. Now it's considered like a mode or whatever.
Right.
It's getting a little into Robloxy territory.
It is. Yeah.
But hopefully it works out better for people in the end than that, because
I just think it's promising. It's promising for indie developers right now, especially even if you're, you're an indie developer, but really you're just a kid who just got out of school and you need to show you can actually do something.
Do stuff. Yeah.
Here is a contained tool.
I mean, here's a portfolio maker.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's like, we're living in the best time for that. When you look at like the indie world direct today, what was the game? God, it was like it was Animal Well. I wrote down like it's one dude who built the whole thing, and he had his funny man guy to help him talk about it because he was clearly nervous. You know which one I'm talking about? Where the guy's like tromping in the tree.
Donkey. Everyone knows who Donkey is.
Okay.
He's actually one of the most prominent like Scrimblow Bimblow YouTubers.
That's amazing. Okay, well, he was in it, and I think one of the things that they focused on, like, oh, I built this thing basically entirely alone, and that's a selling point right now. Not to like shit on that game though. Nothing about that game necessarily stands totally out while saying you were the one who built it completely alone. It could be a wonderful game. I'm not saying you shouldn't play it. Absolutely play the game. But it's like a puzzle games are the games that one dude builds in his basement trying to stand out.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got Unreal Editor that lets you build a game that appeals to mass audiences, possibly to stand out. One of those two options is more likely to get you a job in today's,
Yeah,
development
because if you're
environment.
good with Unreal, you're gonna
Right.
have way more like use to many other companies.
And even though it is extremely impressive that you built something from scratch alone, the other one's going to get you more attention to possibly get you work and put food in your belly,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
I guess though it really depends on what your goal is. Maybe you're just doing this
That's
because
true.
you just had a hobbyist thing.
Oh,
Maybe you're
yeah.
doing it,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe you're doing it because it's like Super Meat Boy. You just like, if you have one hit game that can feed you for the rest of your life,
Right.
maybe that's the reason. I think, yeah, it really kind of depends on what your goal is or what, like, your end game.
And if you're doing it for love,
Yeah,
that's
which I
something
imagine most people who make
in
the just
indie.
like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna make a 2D platformer that's hard as fucking balls, because
I missed
I
that.
need to have my nuts pinched in a vice, game difficulty wise to feel anything anymore.
Yeah, you just miss the toon games. That's what's
Yeah.
up. You miss all the Saturday morning cartoon games that are hard as balls for
Hard
no
as balls.
reason.
No, well, they're hard as balls because they're poorly designed, and
How
now
dare you?
indie developers, they make like very meticulously designed hard games.
Yeah, they meticulously designed them to be as poorly designed as those older games that were hard as fuck. That's what they're doing. But yeah, there was I guess as a lead in for the wider, world of indie games right now and what that looks like moving forward. Did you have any one game in the indie world presentation that really stood out to you? I mean, because genre-wise, it
Oh
was like
yeah,
Harvest Moon and
actually,
Metroidvania was like,
it's funny because there were like a couple, and they were both part twos. And I'm like, there was a part one.
man,
Um, yeah, there was a couple games like that where there was like there was the Netflix game in particular. I don't know what you call it, Stranger Things, Twin Peaks, Knats game at the end, the time traveling one.
oh right, yeah,
And I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, oh, it's part two.
Oxenfree.
What was it called? Oh yeah,
Wasn't it called
Oxenfree.
Oxenfree 2 Lost Signals?
Yeah, Oxenfree 2. I'm like, there's an Oxenfree 1. But I'm like,
Yeah.
it was kind of intriguing from like the general plot point.
It had an intriguing sounding story that it reminded me somehow, very vaguely of like Alan Wake's style,
Yes. Yeah, like
where
a
it made me
2D
go
Alan
like, "Oh,
Wake.
like a little Alan Wake-ish kinda,"
Uh-huh.
and so that intrigued me.
You know
2D side-scrolling, I don't know, the story has to be really friggin' good to make that last
Yeah.
longer than a few hours.
I'm a little spoiled because like if you want like a 2D side scroll, technically side scroll, or at least side view, and you just want the story to be intriguing, I'm like I'm gonna push it again. Like Andrew needs to play 13 Sentinels. Um,
Is that side-scrolling?
yeah.
I guess I really need to.
Except when it's actual gameplay, and then it's an RTS overhead. Um,
Weird, but I do like both of those things though. Like I like RTS gameplay, so
yeah, it's more like tower defense RTS.
fucking hate tower defense.
Oh, it's so easy though, because it's just like go because like the tower is like so mindlessly easy to defend. Put a couple turrets and you don't have to ever worry about it again.
Hell yeah. Love that.
It's because like they balance patched it for this when the Switch version came out and they updated the PS4 to do it, and they're like, okay, yeah, we tweaked it so it's not like this anymore. I'm like, I still put turrets down and I still never have to worry about.
I love
the
that.
tower.
Yeah, I
I've
really
never
love that.
ever worried about it, but no, like there was Teslagrad. Like I've heard the name before, but like I saw Teslagrad 1 and 2, and I'm like, this looks good. Like I don't remember. I mean, I've heard the name, but I don't remember anything about. I don't know if I've ever actually seen it, but like that was a shadow drop
Yeah.
for one remaster and two, and I'm like, this actually looks pretty dang good.
Well, I think
Blasphemous
something
2 looked really good too. Like,
It did, yeah, the Metroidvania Blasphemous 2. One thing about Teslagrad 2 that I really thought was cool is that it's all physics-based. Like, if you're a
yeah.
physics nerd, and I'm far from a physics nerd, like, I don't know enough about physics. I should know more, but I do think that's kinda interesting. I wonder if you know more about physics, you will figure out those puzzles easier,
Hmm.
and I wonder how much it teaches you about physics, because something that I don't think gaming gets enough credit for generally is how much gaming actually teaches you about the wider world if they're trying to.
Yeah. Oh God, there's a game that literally apparently is praised by astrophysicists. What, Kerbal Space Program.
Oh, yeah, it's supposed to be really, really, really
Like
accurate.
they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's really silly, but like it'll actually teach you real physics.
Yeah. I saw a YouTube, I think it was from like a civil engineer who also loves rocket science,
Mm,
because that seems exactly the guy who's like, you know what I'm going to get into? Rocket science. And he loves Kerbal Spaceport. And
yeah.
I've never played it, but it does look like silly fun, and you get to learn things about rockets. That seems cool as hell to me.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll
Um,
actually learn about like, proper rocket building, escape velocity, all that stuff. Like,
that's really cool. Um, but
what?
Blasphemous 2, I looked at it, and it has like a Castlevania
Yeah.
feel, and even the weapons that you choose to like change and stuff, how you play. I do love that. Part of me wonders if indie games that are made to be Metroidvanias, how often do they sink and how often do they swim? Like, how
Mm,
often does it really get you attention? Obviously, this is the second one, so it got
yeah.
attention. But I wonder
Because
if
I
that's
think
the way
this
to
one is a
stand out.
little bit more Souls like, because it's a little bit like the combat's not just sort of like run and slash, run and gun. Like it's a little bit more like
Difficult.
stand your ground, like a little more heavy when you're actually fighting things. Like encounters are a little bit more involved than just sort of like run by and chop a thing in half as you run. Like because I mean, though I do like that about Castlevania. I haven't played Blasphemous. I played Salt and Sanctuary. Um,
Salt and Sanctuary is supposed to be really good, but also really hard, right?
yeah, so
That's the first one that I ever heard was a 2D Souls game.
yeah, and that's what they're going for. I think this looked way more Castlevania, Metroidvania than 2D Souls personally
Yeah.
for Blasphemous. But it looked good though. The art and the general look of it stood out, and that was kind of like if we're talking about like past like the trajectory of indie gaming was that before everything was a fucking Metroidvania. Um, and then there was like a sort of like that sort of morphed into a little bit like Metroidvania or what I call the Kaizo Mario, just the balls hard like platformer.
Hmm.
And then things have kind of really fucking gone into like Animal Crossing territory where like everything Stardew Valley was this huge success, so it's like
Well, they saw
everyone's
Animal Crossing make a killing, and they were like, I can do that.
yeah.
And I get that.
Which I again I'd be a little wary of. Um, I think if anything, I'm actually kind of excited, to see that there were some things that were just different, like and not just different for different sake, like or things that are like taking niche or sort of like obscure games. Like there was so Rift of the Necrodancer, which
Mhm.
is a follow up of the Necrodancer games. So they're like, okay, well, Guitar Hero hasn't been around in a while. Bust a Groove hasn't been around in a while, and then Rhythm Heaven as well, where they had the whole like like characters like
Mhm.
you tap the button in beat and watching like little flash animation happening. So they're kind of taking a lot of like music genres that just kind of died, and they're like, hey, let's bring that shit back, which is kind of nice to see actually. Like because those were fun, and this is I feel like a game like Bust a Groove, or Rhythm Heaven, or just sort of like Guitaru Man, if shit like that from the past. Like this is where the indie space I think can thrive, where like something that was like a quirky, oddball PS2, GameCube
Yeah.
game that it flopped back when it came out because it was $50 and it looked weird. But like as a $20 indie game, with obviously people who are into indie games have way more like of a pulse on different variety of games than Joe Blow. I play Madden and Call of Duty every year. It's like this is where like those type of things can thrive, I feel.
Right.
Like this. That's kind of the fun thing, is to see like, okay, well, remember this weird oddball game? Well, I'm going to bring it back because the genre is otherwise dead, which kind of leaves it open to you.
One of the things that I sort of tangential to that is I think where indie games will sort of thrive is in adapting tabletop games.
Hmm.
They had the weird one, which probably isn't the tabletop game for me, which was like the cat and quilt thing.
Oh yeah, the crazy. My girlfriend called it the crazy cat lady game.
Yeah. Well, there's two crazy cat lady games in this
Yes, there were.
direct, but the reason why, granted, that one's not for me, but a tabletop game, especially one that you can play with friends online, as an indie game, the rules sort of for your game are set out for you. You're adapting this tabletop experience into something, I don't know personally, since I'm not a dev, how easy or hard it is to do it, but it seems like in terms of logistics, adapting a tabletop game to a virtual experience that you can then share with people online is a lot easier to show, one, your networking ability, because netcode,
Yeah.
you don't really think about netcode that often in the indie space, I guess, but an indie saying like, hey, I can have really good netcode stands out in my opinion, because netcode in this market is one of the biggest key things to multiplayer games doing well. So
Yeah.
even if your game is only a really well done board game, essentially, if your netcode is good, I think that's a good way to stand out. And personally, I think indie developers probably are either doing it because they're passionate or doing it as a way to
Yeah.
get a larger.
And there was that I forget the name. You probably, I don't know if you remember it either. The Subnautica devs. Remember they were doing a
Yeah.
full on tabletop? I forget. I don't remember what the project was called.
No, but it does stand out where I'm like, hey, that's
But
cool
they
as
were
well.
going like hardcore, even letting you like do paint. Like they were like going to have little digital like
Right.
characters, and they're going to have a whole miniature painting system built in the game. Like they're like, no, the whole tabletop lifestyle was being recreated digitally.
I think that's genius. Because if you're
Yeah.
talking about as games as a service too, like one of the best ways you can do it is to digitize that tabletop experience where you can buy new sets of figures to paint and to put
Yeah.
on you can buy more environment pieces and stuff if it's reasonably priced, which I mean most of those tabletop pieces aren't reasonably priced in my opinion. That is an expensive hobby, as anybody who's done it knows. But the point is like if you have a digital version of that, I really do think that that appeals to a hardcore,
Yeah.
audience.
And if I was one of the big tabletop manufacturers, I don't know who they are or whatever, but like I would absolutely want to, do what like the Subnautica developers doing, right? Where they're like, hey, we have this whole like digital thing, whatever. Offer a way for you to like literally submit your sculpted and painted miniature, and they will 3D print it for you. And then you order it and you can
Yeah, oh
like
yeah,
use
that's
it in
good.
a real tabletop experience. Like
I was
I don't
thinking,
like. Maybe that's a logistical nightmare, but to me, if you were like a big tabletop manufacturer, I would absolutely want to have a game where it's like people can kind of just like play around. They can paint pre-made sculpts already, or if they were crazy enough, people could go in and sculpt their own thing, and then it's like the price would be different between like just a painted
like
pre-made
Hero
or
Forge, yeah, like having
yeah, or
Hero
like
Forge attached to it.
okay, we'll 3D print this for you, and then we'll paint it specifically to your schematic, and then we'll ship it to you,
Yeah,
and
no,
it's yours. It'll be customized to you.
see, I had it the other way where I was like, hey, this is a really great way for the amiibo life to come back. You buy your set of like the army that you want in your game, and
Mhm.
like you can import that set into game, and then you have the physical version and your digital version if you
I
want.
think the problem with that comes in where it's like, okay, like what happens when like some units, or whatever, like what a unit style becomes rare and people can't find it and they're sold out. And then it's like I literally can't use that unit in my game digitally because I can't find the amiibo.
Oh no, see, I wasn't saying that you can only get the unit. Like, say you play Warhammer in person, but you
Mhm.
also want to play the Warhammer digital version. You can now take your army that you've built up physically
Hmm.
and you can import that army into your digital version so you can have digital Warhammer games using your
Yeah.
army that you already built.
I mean,
You don't have to do it that way. You
could
buy
go both
digital too.
ways by having like, your hero unit, your main hero unit. He could have like the save data for all of the stuff like that you have like on the
Yeah.
table. You could literally like save that all as like almost like a big memory card onto like your main hero unit to like put that digitally in like in a game when you go online or whatever.
Right. Like there's opportunities here for that to be a thing. And I think being an indie developer that can show that you can make a board game work digitally,
Yeah.
that's good stuff.
So, if there are any other like quirky genre, like either genres or just one-off game styles, is there anything you can think of from like PS2 to 360 era that like, oh, I loved this game. It was so weird and quirky, but it's kind of sad that nothing ever came of it.
Ape Escape.
Ape
We could
Escape.
do more Ape Escape. It's not a hard concept. I think an indie dev could do it. And yes, every single time I'm sitting there like, someone's going to do an Ape Escape rip.
I mean, it's
An Ape
technically, isn't that
Escape
just a 3D platformer?
Sort of, I guess. And
It's like a 3D
it's a
platformer, but like the
collectathon.
MacGuffin runs away.
Yeah, it's very much, yeah, I guess Banjo-Kazooie where the jiggy pieces run away.
Run away, and you have to like knock them out or whatever.
And I think that there's a nostalgia factor for me
Yeah.
saying this, but I think there's a
You know,
market for it.
And I think, to be fair, which I'm not being to Ape Escape, is that Ape Escape's almost kind of like a platform puzzler.
A little bit, yeah.
Because the rooms, the way the game is set up, it's not like you're not running around like giants. You're not running around like fucking Hyrule and Breath of the Wild to find a like 900 Korok seeds or monkeys. It's like they're kind of like small areas, rooms that like you go in and it's sort of like a puzzle, figuring
Right.
out how to capture the monkey, because it's not necessarily just run up, whack him with the lightsaber, and then net him. Like that's early on, but then it's like every room becomes its own little like meticulously designed puzzle on how you have to chase, stun, capture this damn monkey.
And indie devs love puzzles.
They sure fucking do.
They really fucking do, and I'm gonna let them have that. A good puzzle is hard to beat.
We started to see it with Hot Shot Racing, and then there's another one that recently came out. Zyber, if you're listening, I apologize. I can't. The name escapes me. Arcade style racers, like really just super arcadey style racers. Those to me are something in the indie space that I feel like could really like make a nice comeback. Because the thing is, no one's making arcade racers on like the major publishers anymore, right? Like no one's actually doing that. It's so weird because we have our Gran Turismos now, right?
Right.
And we have our Forzas, and I
everything's
think,
super in depth.
Yeah. Like you have like Forza Horizons, which people argue are arcade racers, and I'm like, yes, they kind of are, but like let's also be honest here. Forza Horizon is also like its own thing, where it's an open world racer, is what it is. Like, yes, it's a little arcadey, but like, I mean, if you go really high speed and you try to drift your car, like it kind of like does. It's a little too realistic. It like starts spinning out like nuts. So I miss like Burnout, Daytona. Like we had Cruisin' come out in the middle of the pandemic, and I mean it's a massively downgraded port to run on the Switch, because the Switch is a fucking refrigerator, touchscreen. As far as like CPU GPU levels go now.
Yeah.
But like I would actually, because I downloaded and played Hot Shot Racing, which is done in the style of like virtual racing, like really simple polygons, like the first polygons where they didn't have textures, they were all flat shaded, super blocky, but it's really fun. And like what I really wish, I would love to have like an Outrun 3, personally. Ooh. But like, even if like here's not so much a racer, but like a Crazy Taxi. Like Crazy Taxi, I feel still has like notoriety, and people kind of like jive with it. And I feel like having a game that's like that, where it's like go and pick up a customer, take them to do location, right. Try to rack them, but you're just hopping and flying all around the city. It's all of these things that I think like that's kind of a genre I feel like I don't see it as much in the indie space, but I feel like there's a genre there that like, okay, no one's going to pay $60 for a Crazy Taxi game in today's time. Nobody's really going to pay $60-$70 for an arcade racer.
But they might
Maybe a
make money.
burnout, but like I feel like if you're doing a $20, $30, $40 game that in the style of an arcade racer or a burnout or something like that, or a Crazy Taxi, I think there's opportunity there.
I mean, in that same vein, though, arcade anything, right? Like Skate. I don't know. They're supposedly making a Skate 3, but I haven't seen shit about
Four,
it.
you mean?
4? Is it 4 now?
It's
God.
4. They made it 3 a long time ago, but yeah, you're
Yeah,
thinking of
there's like
4.
a beta coming, but like Skate is another one that I think is that arcadey
Yeah,
ride
because
around.
shit. I mean, they did the Tony Hawk remake before
Right.
Vicarious Visions got sent to Blizzard jail.
That's so sad.
But
Yeah, no, but
like extreme sports games like that.
arcade gameplay in general, like arcadey games, arcade shooters. Everybody's talking about that right now because Warzone 2 is such a sort of disappointment in term to a lot of streamers. I still think it's probably doing okay generally. They keep supporting
Yeah.
it, and Black Cell 3 or Black Cell is like one of the top 3 selling things on Steam right now. So obviously people still buy that bullshit, but you have like X Defiant, I think is the current one. It's just an arcadey shooter that reminds people of COD 4, just like that fast paced.
Yeah, Shadow Warrior, stuff
Yeah.
like that.
CS, like Counter-Strike is supposedly having a revival soon and stuff. And it's just like, I think that if you can make a clean, arcade shooter, yeah, okay, it's probably not easy, but
it's a major franchise. We know it's kind of a Cinderella story. Was that Aliens Fire Team?
yeah, I think that's true too.
They're porting it over to the Switch. They just announced recently,
Yeah,
the cloud version.
Yeah, you're not really playing it on the Switch because the Switch can't run it.
No,
but the Switch, if you got decent internet, the Switch can handle, I guess downloading and uploading fast.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's a great game, and it's very simple and to the point. It's very much an arcadey style. 3-person co-op, go in, shoot aliens. It's it's not the greatest game ever, but like it's very well designed because it's very much like go in, like okay, you have like your chase sequences, your runaway sequences, and you have like your hold your ground sequences, and it doesn't need to deviate too much from what works, which is putting yourself into crazy situations and then just having to blast your way out.
Well, speaking of blast your way out, you know what I was just thinking about. You don't see a lot of light gun games anymore.
Yeah,
but light gun tech is so cheap now, like literally so cheap. The IR readers and lasers are so cheap right now that I was kind of wondering, the first person who can make light gun game like set off, whether it's on Steam or on PS5 or whatever, I feel like that's going to explode just as a dumb fun party game.
You know what's funny is that like it kind of also flew on a lot of people's radars, like because they had the House of the Dead remake, came out like a week early on Switch or whatever, and then it was on PC and whatnot. What the funniest thing about it is apparently that's like that publisher developer's like best-selling game ever.
Yeah, that's actually not that surprising at all.
You use gyro aiming, and it works okay.
Yeah, so you're not holding the Joy-Con as a light gun. You
can.
That's the way to do it.
I mean, you that is one way to play. It just uses gyro, and there's like a button to recenter it, which you might be pressing a lot just to like just press the center and then move and center yourself, whatever. It's not that bad. It's like you literally tap a button. But like I use it with like just a normal pro controller, and the gyro is like it did its job well enough. But if you play it on PC with like modded PC light guns, then it's light guns on PC that basically mimic the mouse, then it becomes amazing.
Hell yeah. That's what I want. Or like, say you have a giant TV, say you have a 60-inch TV in your house, and it's like a light gun game on today's TVs, be good times. And it's not that hard to set up,
Yeah, that's the only real problem is just like, it requires like an IR bar somewhere.
But they're so fucking cheap now, and they're so accurate. 15, let's say as soon as 10 years ago, it was a bit of a pain in the ass to get a light bar that works. You know, the Wii didn't the
Mhm.
Wii U have a
Wii
light
and
bar?
Wii U had a light bar, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, but they made so many of them and they got so good with it that it's like light gun games could come with its own light bar that plugs into one of the controller slots or something like that on a
Yeah.
PS5 or
But you also want to hold a gun when you do it. I mean, this is America.
hell yeah. I'm down. Give me that Glock with a little cord that comes out and plugs in, or it's a wireless charging dock. It can be like
I
that
think
new
there's,
BioFire game.
again, this is something that could maybe happen in the indie space where it's like, hey, maybe you don't need the big peripheral, but hey, we're just gonna make a light gun game because people don't make light gun games anymore.
Yeah, but I honestly think that they're, you know, even if it's as simple as the old Area 51 games, think about how popular that fucking game was. They had to literally replace the guns several times in
Yeah.
our old arcade. You know, um, you know, if you were to make one as good as Time Splitters, or not Time Splitters,
Time Crisis.
Time Crisis, thank you. Yeah, you're not going to have the pedal at home probably, but if you could make something that capture, I mean, so much nostalgia is locked up in arcade games. Being the indie developer that can figure out how to any of those arcade games, get them home. I feel like now, especially like the last light gun game that I think we had was like Vampire Knight.
Oh, PS2 one. Yeah.
Yeah, like we had that one and we loved it. We literally played it so much that we broke the triggers on the guns. Like they're just a good time. And I think focusing on those, like, again, 3 hour window, not super expensive, just 3 hour window gameplay, like that's going to be the window for indie devs because Netflix is getting into Game Pass is going to want that kind of content where it's just like it's an easy buy for them to put it on.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's a little like Power Wash Simulator where it's just kind of like,
Right.
would I buy this game normally? No, I see it on Game Pass. Yeah, fuck it.
I know a guy who literally plays hours a week of Power Wash. Like he stopped playing COD with me and my like regular crew to play COD. He stopped playing because he enjoys Power Wash Simulator so much that he doesn't want to take time off of getting a high score on Power Wash Simulator to play with friends, with real people. So it's like you make the
Well,
next
COD is
Power
kind
Wash
of
Simulator.
miserable now, so
It has gotten to that point where it's like, oof, you have a
I've
bad
actually
time.
moved over to Fortnite at this point.
How
I'm
dare
just in
you?
no build on Fortnite now until something gets figured out.
How dare you? I still refuse to try it. I should try it though. It's supposed to be a good time.
Here's the frustrating thing: it's so much easier to kill people in Fortnite, but the gunplay feels like trash.
Now I was gonna say something controversial, but fuck it. It's because it's made for children, and COD
Sure.
has a skill gap. Get the fuck out of here. Let's talk shit.
Like generally speaking, you will get a way higher KD in Fortnite than you will in any Call of Duty.
Oh well, then I'm switching immediately.
To
Fuck,
Fortnite.
fuck it.
I mean, the gunplay does not feel good, but once you sort of wrestle that alligator, like you're gonna be murking people because like the problem is so many people play Fortnite and most people aren't good except the killers at the very end. So
Are you trying to say that Ninja built his whole career on beating up children?
absolutely,
Oh, I guess I have a
bro.
reason to admire
You,
the
you
guy
know
now.
they put you in bot lobbies for the beginning, but I had 12 victories, bro.
Hell yeah.
It finally put me into like the like the sweaty lobbies, and even then, even the sweaty lob. Well, there's when you start winning, they put you into the real sweaty lobbies, and then it's like, what the fuck is going on? These people are like hacking, or like they have not seen the sun in 5 years.
And
But
they're
like
only 10 years old.
generally speaking, you play Fortnite, you get to the last, or you get down to like the last top five, easily. And
Wow.
then it's usually like that last team that's sitting there that's getting perfect headshots with the heavy sniper and one-shotting people.
Oof. Yeah, no, I saying the whole skill gap thing. I shouldn't really talk shit because I'm really not all that good anymore. But if it's truly that different, maybe I will jump over to Fortnite. I feel like
Fortnite's
a
just
man
this thing
again.
where it's like it's really easy to actually kill people in Fortnite. So like you get that sense of it, but like the actual the mechanics of shooting and hitting people doesn't feel very good. I still don't think it feels very good. Even when I'm like coming to grips with how it functions, it doesn't feel nearly as impactful to kill someone in Fortnite as it did in any given
Well,
Call of Duty.
I played PUBG for a year, so bad gunplay isn't all that bad,
No,
all
there
that
you
new
go.
for me. You know, um, I guess PUBG technically counts as an indie game.
Well,
Indie
okay,
battle
that's the
royale.
other thing too, because in indie world today, to go back to that, they had like their sizzle reel. There's fucking Five Nights at Freddy's in there. I'm like, how are you indie? You've made billions of dollars at this point.
Right.
Like, okay, I get it. It started as an indie thing. It has indie roots. Don't get me wrong. I
But you've built
understand
an empire.
that aspect, but I mean, like, this thing is like billions of dollars in at this point. You are like anything but indie. You're like that's like George Lucas claiming he's an indie director in 1989. No, you're fucking not.
My favorite interview I've ever seen of George Lucas is where he talks about becoming what he hated.
Yeah,
He's like,
he
I hated
totally
the
did.
studio. I hated the studio system, so I went out and built my own studio and then became everything I hated. And you're just like, damn, George, you're feeling like I used to. I used to talk shit about George Lucas. And then the more I learned about him, and especially the older I got, I sympathize with George Lucas so much, where I'm just like, oh man, he really
I almost feel bad for him because like he became aware of the fact that he became his own monster.
to
And he
fight
knows
them.
it.
Yeah, like he was fighting the monsters and the monstrosities of the industry at his time, did genius things. I mean, I don't think you could find a better producer and studio executive than George Lucas of that time period. But in doing that, became all the things that he literally, the reason Hollywood is what it is today is he made the mold for what Hollywood is today. I mean,
Can't get away.
most of the people that you might hear having shit talked about him, your Kathleen Kennedys and stuff, were his students, were his like proteges and stuff. I mean,
Mhm.
watch the hatred that's going to come for Dave Filoni when he, becomes even more prominent. Right now, he's sort of the creative brainchild of all things Star Wars, where he fixes the problems Star Wars is having because he's George Lucas's sort of like successor creatively.
Yeah.
He's keeping the real Star Wars alive. A lot of people say, watch the hate come for him as he gets more power. Watch it come for him because he's gonna do what Lucas did to try and like consolidate power to get his projects made, and then he's going to become everything Lucas hated because that's the way that
Yeah.
shit works. I
I
guess. I
mean,
guess we're all
honestly,
cursed for that.
the real fault of George Lucas, besides like the penny pinching he did on the movies to make them unprofitable, so that no one ever got residuals but him. Besides that,
Yeah.
besides that aspect, the real problem with George Lucas is that he's just not a people person. He's an idea
Wow.
man. Like
I,
it's always hilarious to hear like the anecdotes from actors where they're like they like George Lucas. No one said anything bad about working with George Lucas, but it was always kind of like it was just kind of funny taking direction from him because it was like okay, what knob should I be hitting or what should I be doing? Like Harrison Ford asked him early on, like about like how should I pilot the Falcon? What should the I don't know, just hit
yeah.
some stuff or
Act.
whatever.
Well, he's very much a producer's director in the sense of like he doesn't. I don't think he gives a fuck about performances. I think he doesn't. Sometimes you hear people talk about actors where they're just like, you say the lines and that's your job. And it's like, yeah, but you also bring emotional depth. Like the
Yeah.
reason you hear about like actors, directors, is because they understand the acting process and they work pretty closely with an
Mhm.
actor. And usually they get really solid, subtle, nuanced performances out of their actors and they're amazing. The other guys, the guys who are like producer directors, they're all like, yeah, say the lines and flip the switch and get the fuck out of my hair, man. I'm dealing with the cinematography. I'm trying to set this up because you can't see the green screen that I have to make work.
Yeah, yeah.
walk 5 steps, turn left, and speak to this tennis ball. I don't give a fuck about anything else because I got to make my work begins after the shoot happens.
Yeah.
Lucas is a genius when it came to visual effects and building all that up. I don't think he cares about actors at all. I think
he doesn't get them. I think that's why he always constantly begs Steven to do it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. George Lucas, I honestly, I don't think he'd want to talk to me because there's probably too much evidence from my youth of talking shit about him to like he wouldn't believe me. I genuinely, of all directors in Hollywood, if I was going to sit down with them, I think George Lucas might be the one I'd want to sit down with and just like ask questions to, because the dude obviously hacked all of Hollywood. And like he clearly has talent. I mean, you can look at his early movies and see that like he was an indie director. It's just that he shifted to being the studio because he was so pissed at studios and he went his own way and he won. Like he fought Goliath barehanded on Goliath's terms and won.
Yeah.
That's impressive as hell. I would love to figure out how the fuck he did that. I also think he doesn't like talking about it very much. Because even in his like, he's very candid in interviews. Like he never shies away from that.
Honestly, yeah, and I kind of love that about him. Like I'll never not laugh about the white slavers comment.
Dude says exactly his point of view every single time. So I would love that. I wonder if is there anyone in the indie gaming space that like is the George Lucas of indie game development? Would it be the guy who started Epic Games?
I would say Stardew Valley's creator probably.
Really?
Just because he was like he wanted more Harvest Moon, and Harvest Moon was kind of like, taking a backseat or whatever. So he's just kind of like, all right, well, I'm going to make my own Harvest Moon because I'm.
And then he did really well at it.
Yeah, he did better than Harvest, but he still loved Harvest Moon. And that's the other thing too is that, and this is something you can't plan on, is that it's like being in the right place at the right time. Like sometimes I think there's a luck aspect to even indie developers where it's just like you're making the game that people have wanted, either they vocally wanted but weren't getting or didn't know they wanted, and you're filling like you're filling a void, in the game space somewhere. And that's usually when like indies like really excel, is because there's some void or something people are missing, which is why I say like this is why something like an arcade racer or a music rhythm game or an extreme sports arcade style Tony Hawk game, like these are like voids that have kind of been left in the game industry, and then like someone from an indie will come in and blow it up and it'll do really well, and then they're gonna and it kind of like because there was people were missing this thing. And now right now I feel like as far as like how do I feel indie games are going in general right now, I feel it's a little 50-50 because I think there are some indies that are trying to fill those voids, those genre voids, right? And then I think there's a lot of indies that are kind of like chasing Stardew Valley, chasing Animal Crossing, chasing Metroidvania, Symphony of the Night. Like,
no, you're totally right. Here's where the luck aspect comes in. You have to start making that game 2 years before the audience knows they want it.
Yeah.
Because then when it comes out, the audience has to go like, oh, yes, I've wanted this for so long, blah, blah, blah. But 2 years ago, when you first start making it, in order to be the guy that happens to release it right when everybody's like jonesing for it, nobody's talking about it when you first start. You have to want it.
Yeah,
that's such and that's true about I think anything independently developed or made, in anything, books, media, whatever. And I don't know how, obviously I guess it's the opportunity meets preparation saying of luck, but how do you know what to prepare for? Or are you just preparing for it, and then when that thing comes out, you happen to be the guy that I have Harvest Moon, here you go. Like what how do you time that? Because timing really is everything.
Yeah, and that's where luck kind of comes into it.
Right.
Because maybe you're filling a void in a genre that people don't really care about anymore.
So you think, I guess in closing, you think the Void really is like arcade games right now? It's like that arcadey. People don't know they want it yet, but like it comes out and people are going to be like, "Oh, there's the Void. That was what's lacking," because that can shift the whole industry. Indie
I
developers
think
can shift the
so.
entire industry.
I think Void is like in arcade games, and in particular, kind of like racing, and like you said, maybe even like in games where, because people are very, very, I want to say, not I want to say fickle, but like people kind of like jump and like lose interest in stuff very quickly. So I think having quick pick up and play experiences that are of a certain quality, um, I'd be more interested in like, hey, I got this Burnout like game. It's on Game Pass or whatever. Oh, cool, awesome. I'll check it out. Rather than I have another game that requires you to invest, 50 hours into planting shit and building up
Right.
your town. And so I'm like, no, I don't want to do any of that shit.
No, thank
and
you.
even
No.
if I did, I'd find there's many other options for that. So, um, yeah, I don't know. For me, I can't say what the Void is necessarily. I'm not like I can't like predict what's going to be the next big hit, but I feel like there's been a couple things, like big one being kind of you brought up was like the Tony Hawk style game. Skateboarding and snowboarding, it feels to me like the Tony Hawk thing did pretty well. The biggest problem is that it kind of couldn't live on. It had no life on a streaming platform because of all the copyrighted music.
Right?
So what you really need to do, I think, is if you do bring a sports game back and you're an indie dev, you're obviously not going to get any like big music labels or whatever. Find someone, who can make original music that's great and fitting for that game. But then make it if you can make it of the quality or of the addictiveness of a classic snowboarding or a classic skateboarding game. I think that's a big. I do think there is a whole like a void there. Like honestly, like it blows my mind. Well, I mean, I guess there was plans to remake Tony Hawk 3 and 4, but again, they had to go to Blizzard jail because Blizzard was fucking up hard on Diablo stuff. So
On everything, really.
Vicarious Visions
Yeah.
had to go in and become part of Blizzard to fix shit for Diablo, and it's like, well, okay, obviously that's going to sell more than a Tony Hawk, 3 and 4 remake, but like, I don't know, Tony Hawk will never be the number one game selling game of the month like it was back on PlayStation 1, right? It's never going to be that big again, but like you can still, I feel like there's still a couple million sales you could find out of there.
The thing
If
is,
it's of a high enough quality, I feel like something like Crazy Taxi style gameplay could easily like become an indie darling.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I know that they're supposedly making another Counter-Strike right now, but like that's the game I've been sitting there talking about for like probably a year where I'm like, what they need is they need another Counter-Strike.
Here's a question, because I've seen this kind of pop up on YouTube now from content creators and stuff, is like the death of arena shooters. And I'm like, I think arena shooters are going to come back. I think it's only a matter of time. People are going to get frustrated and they're going to come back to arena shooters and go, you know what? I kind of miss this. I miss this, and I think it's going to come back.
If it's the Quake style arena shooter, yes. I mean, Halo sort of had, well, I haven't played Infinite's multiplayer, but like Halo always had that sort of arena shooter team deathmatch, like where the map is sort of circular and I actually think Halo's petering off because they haven't done anything particularly, to keep people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Halo's a disaster at this point.
But I do think games like Quake or Unreal Tournament or like that style of arena shooter where you're like running around and the gun is basically your arm and stuff. Yeah, totally. I think that's going to have a comeback. I don't know that it's going to be huge because like Splitgate was Splitgate, which was kind of an arena shooter and was a lot of fun. But I don't know that you're going to see a move away from like the tactical shooter. Like I feel like tactical shooters still carry the day right now.
And you're right. It may not become like the industry defining game. Where like Quake 3 was like was like a major early esports title, if you want to call
Right.
it that or whatever. Who knows? But like, I feel like having just a really fun, easy to jump into, quick. It just has to look good, play well, good net code.
Right.
Aesthetics are hard to nail down because every indie developer wants to be like, I have my own unique style, and it's like nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, for shooters, I
Like
think
make
the
sure
hard
it
part's
appeals.
netcode.
Just make sure it appeals to more than just you, and that's hard to do, especially because the whole point of indie is to be individual and whatever. But it's like I'm just saying, an arena shooter that has good aesthetics, is easy to pick up and play, has good net play. I think it's there. I think it's there for the taking. If I wanted to predict anything, I think an arena shooter at some point is going to come back and like just do super well, and everyone will be like, "Oh, wow, look at these! These are so cool and fun. It's straight to the point." And I'm like, "Yeah, I remember this because I'm old, but like, welcome back."
Well, it's one of those things where like we've talked about in the past where I'm like, why isn't there a Titanfall BR? Which yes, I understand there is technically a Titanfall BR, but I mean like you're in a fucking mech.
In a mech.
Yeah, you're fighting other mechs, and that would be kind of an arena shooter. You're going through cities, destructible environments and stuff. That would be really hard to do. I understand that, but like that's the thing. I know an
What's the
indie
point of
developer's
next
not going
gen
to.
if you're not going to push tech?
And how many people do we know that like loved Mech Assault games or Chrome Hounds or shit, and like they could just never get that one aspect that Titanfall really had of mech fighting games. Give me Titanfall. Give me destructible environments like Chrome Hounds, and I think Chrome Hounds had destructible, but other mech games. And give me that combat in an arena style shooter where the arena is basically just like, here's a city you've been dropped into, here's a forest, here's some mountains, like, but everything's destructible. You shot that with a big gun, you can literally cause an avalanche, like that kind of shit. I know an indie developer would have a hard time with that because that's probably a pretty
This would be
hard
like
game.
an indie team. It wouldn't be like an individual. It'd be like a team.
Give me that, and I think that's the arena shooter that really takes off. I think you start a big slew of mech games again if that's the case.
Yeah. Well, they have that, and they have that Gundam Assault game or whatever, like their Overwatch clone, but it's just an Overwatch clone.
Yeah.
It's not at this point, like it doesn't really make much. It's not doing what you're talking about yet.
Right. I think that's a good listener question where it's just like, what do you think is the next sort of void for an indie developer to step into that could cause like industry shifting?
Yeah.
Stardew Valley brought back Harvest Moon type games. I mean, with a vengeance.
With a vengeance, yeah.
With a vengeance. Like we get too many of them now. What is that next game? Or if you want to get really specific, what's the next shooter? What's the shooter that brings that shit full circle? But any last points before we thank our?
No, I mean it was. I feel like my the indie world today was like, as my girlfriend said, like it was a little worrying at the start, but then it got really cool. Like we started seeing really cool stuff in the second half.
I was surprised by how many, especially like the DLC section, which was quick, but there's a lot of indie games that are sort of have cult followings now that they get DLC. I mean, Cult of the Lamb, for instance, literally has a cult following where it's just like, that's incredible.
Well, that one's doing something interesting where it's taking there's a little bit of Harvest Moon or more Animal Crossing, really. There's a little bit of Animal Crossing there, but it's like fucked up.
Right.
and then you have like, because you have like that sort of like cute but murderous aesthetic. And then on top of that, they add a whole roguelike, like Zelda one, but like super fast paced, murder spree dungeons and bosses and stuff. So it's kind of like it's doing something really interesting in that space rather than, I don't want to knock on other games, but it's kind of like,
well, that's something that is a good point to bring up. Doing something interesting doesn't necessarily mean that it's complex. A twist that makes the same gameplay hook more interesting is, I think it's harder in the development phase where you're trying to come up with an idea.
Hmm.
But then you already have a roadmap for the type of game you're making, really. So it makes everything else easier. So I think that's a good point. Indie games in general, I think the biggest part or the hardest part of it is standing out in any way.
Yeah, because now there's a lot of them.
And a lot of the art styles tend to blur and, but I do think things
Unfortunately.
like Game Pass and, any of Netflix, any of that style of subscription-based gaming, you got a real opportunity if you're an indie developer to sort of rise and stand out because you have actual platforms that may push your game for you and pay you a little money at the same time. That's cool. But as always, we've got some producers to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Michael Dude. Thank you, Michael. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, The Pink Hammer, The Schmidt One, Screwnami, Koroi35, Hyper Viper 89, Ziggy Z, and Online Persona. Thank you, dudes, and we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.